The store manager's hand, a pale flash of aggression, cut through the air and met the woman's face with a sharp crack. "You don't belong here," Brittany hissed, her voice tight with venom. "This isn't some charity thrift store. Security, escort this woman out, now!" A profound stillness fell over the boutique. The gentle rustle of silk and the soft click of heels ceased as every eye locked on the devastating confrontation. The woman who had been struck, Diana Williams, stood with an incredible, unnerving composure. Despite the sting on her cheek and the weight of a dozen staring eyes, she did not cry out. She did not flinch. Instead, she calmly wiped her cheek with the back of her hand and did something that sent a chill down Brittany's spine. She smiled. It was not a smile of pain or shock, but a knowing, almost amused smile. A smile that held a secret Brittany couldn't possibly comprehend. And in that moment, before the woman revealed who she truly was, the foundation of Brittany's world began to fracture. To understand the quiet power behind that smile, one must rewind 8 hours to the moment Diana Williams first walked through those doors. At 52, Diana was an elegant, composed woman worth exactly $2.8 billion. She had built a retail empire from nothing, 847 stores across the country, this very one included. But what set Diana apart from her peers was her deliberate modesty. She wore faded jeans, a simple sweater, and old sneakers. She drove a 10-year-old Honda. She did this because she never wanted to forget where she came from, or the moments that had forged her resolve, moments exactly like this one. She remembered her own mother, humiliated in a store just like this, and the silent vow she had made as a child. If she ever had the power to change things, she would. Today, she held that power. And Brittany Anderson was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Brittany, at 42, had managed this high-end boutique for 12 years, curating its image with fierce blonde ambition. But beneath the designer clothes was a deep insecurity, born from a middle-class background she desperately tried to conceal. She had clawed her way up from sales associate and now overcompensated with a brutal philosophy: protect the store's reputation at all costs. To Brittany, that meant policing appearances, and she had cultivated a team that mirrored her judgment. There was Maria Gonzalez, a 28-year-old single mother who clung to Brittany's approval as a lifeline for her job. There was Tyler Brooks, 35, an 8-year veteran who genuinely believed Brittany's cruelty was a form of integrity, a defense of the brand that had promoted him 3 times. There was Amber Davis, a young cashier of 24, who idolized Brittany's sharp-edged style, mistaking it for shrewd business acumen. And then there was Helen Carter, a wealthy 67-year-old customer who spent thousands here every month. Brittany treated her like royalty, and in return, Helen acted as the store's unofficial gatekeeper, a vocal supporter of its exclusive atmosphere. Completing the circle was Carlos Rivera, the security guard, a man who trusted Brittany's instincts without question. This was Brittany's army, loyal and blind, unaware they were about to aid in the humiliation of the one person who could dismantle their lives with a single phone call. 8 hours earlier, Diana had entered the store for a surprise inspection. Anonymous letters had been arriving at corporate, detailing a toxic environment at Store 47, complaints of discrimination and poor customer treatment. Diana took such matters personally. She never imagined she would become the primary exhibit. She was quietly examining a display of expensive handbags, observing the flow of the store when Brittany's eyes fell upon her. In Brittany's mind, the worn jeans and old sneakers were an affront. Her prejudices ignited. She marched across the polished floor, her customer service smile stretched thin and artificial. "Oh, honey, are you lost?" Brittany began, her voice dripping with condescension. "The Goodwill is about 15 minutes that way." Diana maintained her composure. "No," she replied politely. "I'm exactly where I need to be." A reasonable person might have retreated, but Brittany saw a challenge. "Sweetie," she purred, drawing the word out like a weapon, "I don't think you realize what kind of establishment this is. These aren't exactly yard sale prices." Nearby, Helen Carter, the wealthy regular, chuckled audibly. The sound was all the encouragement Brittany needed. Emboldened, she raised her voice, playing to the small but growing audience. "We serve a very exclusive clientele here, people with actual money to spend." Unfazed, Diana moved to the jewelry display, genuinely inspecting the quality of the merchandise in her store. Brittany followed, her voice sharpening with mock concern. "Oh, darling, that bracelet costs more than most people's rent for 6 months. Are you sure you wouldn't prefer the costume jewelry section at Target?" She laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that drew more attention. The confrontation was becoming entertainment. Shoppers paused, their curiosity piqued. Noticing the growing crowd, Brittany decided to put on a show. She turned to address the onlookers. Some people just don't understand their place in the world, do they? A man in an expensive suit laughed in agreement. The crowd was on her side, a silent jury enjoying the spectacle of a woman being put in her place. Brittany fed on their energy. Ma'am, I'm trying to save you from the embarrassment of having your payment declined. Diana then did something that pushed Brittany over the edge. She walked to the VIP section and gestured toward a garment. I'd like to try on this dress. It was a $4,000 designer piece. Brittany's eyes lit up. This was the perfect weapon. Attention everyone, she announced, her voice ringing through the now silent store. This lady wants to try on our $4,000 designer dress. Every head turned. Diana stood in the center of the store, bathed in a spotlight of silent judgment. Brittany let the silence hang for a moment before breaking it with theatrical flair. Should I tell her our fitting room policy requires a credit check first? A wave of murmurs and nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Amber, the young cashier, giggled. Ms. Anderson is so funny. Brittany looked Diana up and down with exaggerated disdain. Honey, that dress costs more than your car is worth, assuming you even have a car and didn't take the bus here. The cruelty was breathtaking, a systematic effort to strip another human being of her dignity, and it was working. Helen Carter stepped forward. Really, dear, she said, her tone dripping with false pity. There are plenty of lovely stores more suitable for your budget. Diana, her voice steady, asked to speak with the manager. It was one last chance for decency, one final off-ramp from this highway to humiliation. Brittany spread her arms wide, basking in the attention. Congratulations, you're looking at her. And I'm telling you, you're in the wrong place, at the wrong time, wearing the wrong clothes. Phones were emerging now, small black mirrors poised to capture the spectacle for social media. Brittany, high on her power, delivered another blow. Look around you, sweetie. Look at our real customers. They belong here. They can afford to breathe the same air as our merchandise. This was no longer just humiliation. It was dehumanization. But Brittany wasn't finished. She had one final act in her cruel performance. I'll need to inspect your purse, she declared, adding with a smirk. It's store policy when someone so clearly doesn't belong. We have to check for sticky fingers. The implication hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Though Diana complied, Brittany made a show of it, rummaging through her personal belongings for the entire store to see. Then she found the wallet. It was old, the leather worn, a piece of tape holding one edge together. To Diana, it was a reminder to stay grounded. To Brittany, it was a trophy. She held it up for the crowd. Look at this, everyone, held together with tape. This is what trying to shop above your station looks like. Laughter erupted, sharp and derisive. Poor thing probably saved for months just to window shop, Helen sneered. She probably uses coupons at McDonald's, another customer chimed in. The suggestions began to fly, a hailstorm of insults disguised as advice. The thrift store on 5th is having a sale, someone called out. What about garage sales? Shouted another. An elderly man in a suit jeered. Maybe the dollar store has something in her budget. Each comment was met with more laughter, the crowd feeding on its own cruelty. And through it all, Diana Williams stood with unshakable dignity. She did not argue. She did not defend herself. She simply endured. Because what none of them saw, what none of them could possibly know, was the small, discreet lens of the phone she held loosely in her hand. It had been recording everything. Every condescending word, every cruel laugh, every degrading gesture had been captured in crystal clear audio and high-definition video. The people in this store thought they were witnessing a victory, the righteous expulsion of an intruder. What they had actually witnessed and participated in was the beginning of their own end. They just didn't know it yet. She offered no tears, no defense, no hint of her true identity. She simply stood there, absorbing the onslaught of cruelty with a composure that was almost inhuman. But if one looked closely, past the stoic mask into her eyes, they would have seen something none of these people could possibly recognize. It was not defeat, It was not shame, it was calculation. A mental ledger was being filled. She was committing every face, every voice, every single person who chose to participate in this public stoning to memory, because this was no longer the act of one cruel woman. It was a contagion. The entire store had become a coliseum, and they had all chosen to watch the spectacle, to participate in the blood sport of humiliating another human being. This was a room full of individuals who had willingly traded their decency for the cheap thrill of the mob. The suggestions rained down, each one a stone wrapped in velvet. What about those warehouse clubs where you have to buy in bulk? I believe there's a consignment shop that specializes in more practical attire. Has anyone mentioned yard sales? They're a weekend staple. There are some lovely discount chains for the more budget-conscious shopper. Each offering was delivered with the same mock sincerity, the same condescending tone that made it clear this was not assistance, but an attack. Brittany conducted this orchestra of cruelty with the finesse of a master. She nodded along, adding her own venomous commentary. Such wonderful suggestions, you see? This is why we serve the most discerning clientele in the city. They understand quality, and they understand appropriateness. That word, appropriateness, hung in the air like a blade. She was declaring Diana's very presence a violation, her existence in this sacred space an offense to decent people. But Brittany wasn't finished. This was merely the overture. She was building to a crescendo, her grand finale of cruelty. You could see it in the predatory gleam of her eyes. She had something truly special planned, a capstone to this performance that would be seared into the memory of everyone present. She raised her hand for silence, a conductor calling her orchestra to attention. The crowd hushed instantly, leaning in, eager for the next movement. They were hanging on her every word, captivated by this raw display of power and exclusion. The silence stretched as Brittany savored the moment, her gaze sweeping across her supporters, building the dramatic tension. This was her stage, and she would milk it for all it was worth. And then, she delivered what might have been one of the most devastating verbal assaults ever witnessed. "Honey," she began, her voice dripping with the syrupy condescension of a teacher explaining a simple concept to a hopelessly dim child. "Let me paint a picture for you. Let me help you understand the reality of where you are." She gestured to a dress on a nearby mannequin. "You see that dress you wanted to try on? That beautiful piece of art? For some of our clients, that is a mortgage payment, not for 1 month, mind you, for several." The crowd nodded, their faces masks of smug validation. She was articulating their own sense of superiority. "That handbag you were admiring," Brittany continued, pointing toward a display. "That's a luxury car payment. What a successful person spends on their transportation for a single month." She then motioned toward the shoe salon. "Those heels in the display case? The elegant pair you glanced at? That's a month of groceries for a family of 4, 30 days of sustenance." She paused, letting the comparisons land like hammer blows. The crowd was eating it up, nodding vigorously, murmuring their assent. "This store isn't for people who count pennies," Brittany's voice rose, becoming more theatrical. "It's for people who don't have to count at all. We serve customers who see a $4,000 dress and think, 'That's cute,' not 'That's impossible.' We cater to a world where shopping is entertainment, not necessity." The crowd was completely hers now, mesmerized. They felt seen, validated, part of an exclusive club whose unspoken rules Brittany was now making brutally explicit. "Look around you," she commanded, spreading her arms wide. "Look at the cars in our parking lot. The jewelry our customers wear just to browse. Watches that cost more than a college tuition. This is a different world, sweetie. A world where money isn't an obstacle, it's a tool. Where the question isn't, 'Can I afford this?' but 'Do I want this?'" They were nodding along, some whispering, "Exactly," and "She's absolutely right." They felt she was defending their way of life, protecting their gilded cage, but Brittany had saved the most personal, most vicious blow for last. "You came in here thinking you could pretend to be someone you're not, but we see right through you. The worn-out clothes, mended more than once. The taped-up wallet that should have been discarded years ago. The way you touch the merchandise like you're in a museum, not a store." The cruelty was reaching its peak, a finely honed weapon of character assassination. "You don't belong in this world," she declared, her voice ringing with finality. and everyone here knows it. This isn't about being mean. It's about reality. It's about understanding that there are levels, and those levels don't mix. This is our space, our refuge. And you, she paused, delivering the final verdict, are simply not one of us. The cruelty was so complete, so absolute it left a void in the air. She had systematically dismantled a human being, reducing her to the sum of her perceived economic failings. She had declared her subhuman unworthy of even basic respect. Then came a sound that would etch itself into the memory of all who were present. Applause. Not polite clapping, but a thunderous, rolling ovation, as if Brittany had just delivered a soliloquy for the ages. Cheers and whistles echoed off the polished floors. "Bravo!" one customer shouted. "Perfectly said!" cried another. "Finally, someone who tells it like it is." The applause went on, a grotesque celebration of cruelty. People were genuinely moved, as if she had defended civilization itself from a barbarian at the gates. Brittany, bathed in the glow of their adoration, took an actual bow, a theatrical curtsy as if she were on a Broadway stage, drunk on the power she wielded. Thank you, she said, beaming. "It's all about maintaining standards." Helen Carter was glowing with satisfaction. Tyler Brooks applauded enthusiastically, convinced he had just witnessed perfect management. Even customers who had initially been on the periphery were now clapping, swept up in the collective fervor. As Diana finally opened her mouth to speak, Brittany's hand shot out. The crack of palm against cheek was sharp and absolute, a gunshot in the pressurized silence of the boutique. The act was so sudden, so utterly beyond the pale, that the store seemed to freeze. A vacuum of stunned silence replaced the adoring applause as brains struggled to process what they had just witnessed. Brittany stood there, hands still slightly raised, her face flushed with the adrenaline of someone who had just committed career suicide without an inkling of her folly. She looked down at Diana with a smile of pure condescension, as if scolding a child who had finally been put in her place. "Now," she said, her voice dripping with triumph, "security will escort you out, so our real customers can shop in peace." Carlos Rivera, the security guard, stepped forward, ready to physically remove Diana. The crowd parted, creating a path of shame toward the exit, a gauntlet of smug, victorious faces. Phones were raised, ready to capture the final humiliation. This was the moment a billionaire was about to be forcibly ejected from her own store by her own employee to the cheers of her own clientele. The irony was so thick it was almost suffocating, but they had all miscalculated. They had mistaken composure for weakness, because Diana Williams had been recording everything. Every insult, every cheer, every second of this systematic dehumanization was now high-definition evidence, and she was about to make a phone call that would shatter every life in that room. Instead of breaking, Diana turned and walked calmly toward the exit. It was not a retreat. It was a repositioning. Outside, in the cool afternoon air, the toxic energy of the store gave way to quiet. Through the large plate glass windows, she could see Brittany basking in her victory, the center of an adoring mob. Diana pulled out her phone and dialed. Her voice was level, controlled, the voice of a woman who had built a $3 billion empire on discipline and precision. "James, this is Diana." James Parker, her assistant of 8 years, had navigated hostile takeovers and international crises, but he had never heard this particular tone in her voice. It was the sound of ice forming. "I need immediate legal and security at Store 47, Diana said. "This is a code red." Inside, Brittany saw Diana on the phone and felt a surge of renewed confidence. She shouted through the glass, "And don't come back! Tell your friends this isn't the place for people like you." The crowd inside roared with laughter. Diana ignored her, her focus entirely on the call. "James, I need the ownership documents for Store 47. Pull the security footage from today, all of it. And James, bring the entire legal team." There was a pause. "No, James, this isn't about a lawsuit. It's about a reckoning. It's about showing people who we really are." Inside, Brittany turned back to her flock. "Problem solved," she announced. "Now who wants champagne to celebrate maintaining our standards?" The crowd erupted. Tyler Brooks was dispatched to retrieve the Dom Perignon. Amber Davis gushed to anyone who would listen. "Ms. Anderson was so professional, so perfect. She knows how to protect our store's reputation." The champagne flowed. Toasts were made. "To excellence! Brittany declared, raising her glass. To protecting what makes this place special. Outside, Diana was concluding a very different kind of business. How long, James? Another pause. Good. And James, make sure the entire board of directors is aware of what happened here today. This is going to change everything. She ended the call and looked back at the store. The champagne party was in full swing. What none of them knew was that in precisely 15 minutes, their world was going to end. At exactly 3:47 p.m., 3 black SUVs swept into the parking lot. They moved with an unnerving purpose. The doors opened, and out stepped not shoppers, but sharks. Rachel Stone, the formidable director of human resources, Michael Torres, the head of legal, Sarah Chen, the chief operating officer, and behind them, a phalanx of lawyers and executives. This was a corporate response team. Inside, the partygoers noticed the arrival. Brittany preened. Important customers, she thought. Perhaps they've heard of my masterful handling of the situation. She put on her most dazzling smile and walked to greet them as they entered. Perfect timing, she said with unshakable confidence. I just handled a very difficult situation beautifully. You probably saw that woman outside. Completely inappropriate for our clientele, but I managed it with absolute professionalism. Rachel Stone, a woman whose calm demeanor belied a will of iron forged in 2 decades of corporate battles, surveyed the scene. The champagne, the celebratory mood, the smug faces. Ms. Anderson, I presume? She said, her voice flat and cold. Yes, Brittany Anderson. I protected our brand image and our real customers. Everyone here can vouch for my professionalism. Helen Carter eagerly stepped forward. She was magnificent, a true professional, handled that awful woman perfectly. Others chimed in, a chorus of support for their champion. Rachel Stone's expression remained unreadable. Ms. Anderson, we need to discuss your handling of a customer today. Brittany's confidence swelled. Of course. I followed protocol perfectly. It was textbook management. As you can see, our customers are completely satisfied. Rachel Stone nodded slowly. I see. And you're confident your actions represent the values of Prestige Collections? Absolutely, Brittany declared. Excellence, exclusivity, and quality. I protected all of that today. Rachel's legal team exchanged a look. Ms. Anderson, Rachel said, her voice dropping a degree colder. I'd like you to meet someone. And from behind the phalanx of executives, Diana Williams stepped forward. A hush fell over the store, so profound you could hear the frantic beating of guilty hearts. Brittany stared, her expression a cocktail of confusion and annoyance. Yes, this is the woman. As you can see, she was entirely... Rachel Stone's voice cut through the air, crisp and final. Ms. Anderson, meet Diana Williams. Oh, yes, I know exactly who she is, the manager declared, her voice dripping with disdain. The woman who tried to shop above her station. I explained quite clearly why this establishment is unsuitable for her kind. A heavy silence descended, a stillness so profound you could feel the frantic beat of a heart. Every eye in the boutique was locked on the unfolding drama, a collective sense of unease beginning to curdle the celebratory air. Then Rachel Stone spoke, and with a few simple words, she lit the fuse that would incinerate everything. She is the founder, CEO, and owner of Prestige Collections, she said, her voice a blade of ice. She is your boss. The silence that crashed down wasn't empty. It was a physical weight, suffocating the air. It was the ringing quiet after a bomb blast, where all that remains is pure crystalline shock. The change in Brittany's face was a slow, agonizing spectacle. The mask of smug superiority cracked, crumbling away to reveal raw confusion. Then, as the meaning of the words took root, a creeping horror bled across her features, draining the color from her skin. That's impossible, she stammered, the words catching in her throat. She looks like... Diana Williams spoke at last. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the stunned silence with the precision of a surgeon's blade. Like what, Brittany? She asked, her tone calm, measured, and utterly devastating. Like someone who doesn't deserve basic human respect? The truth of the moment crashed over the onlookers like a tidal wave. You could see it move through the room, a ripple of comprehension that twisted smug smiles into gaping masks of horror. Helen Carter, who had been sneering just moments before, took an involuntary step back, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God," she breathed. "What have we done?" Maria Gonzalez, the single mother terrified of losing her job, began to tremble. "Ms. Williams, I am so sorry. I was just following orders. Please, I need this job." Amber, the young cashier who had idolized Brittany's cruelty, was openly weeping, fat tears tracing paths through her makeup. "I didn't know," she sobbed. "She told us you didn't belong." Tyler Brooks, who had led the applause, was now the color of ash, stammering apologies that no one could hear. The customers who had joined in the public shaming suddenly felt the burn of 100 eyes upon them. Some edged toward the exit, hoping to melt into the city shadows. But Diana, who had been recording everything, remembered every face. The delicate champagne flutes, once symbols of celebration, now felt like lead weights in their hands. The festive air had soured, curdling into a waking nightmare of regret and fear. Brittany stood frozen, a statue of shattered pride. Her world had collapsed in less than a minute. "I didn't know," she finally whispered, a desperate plea. "How could I have known? You dress—" Diana cut her off, her voice devoid of pity. "I look like a human being, one you decided wasn't worthy of your respect." As the corporate team quietly documented every panicked expression, Rachel Stone stepped forward again, her tone now one of clinical finality. "Ms. Anderson, based on the events we have witnessed, your employment with Prestige Collections is terminated, effective immediately." Security guards moved in, efficiently removing Brittany's name tag and badge. She was now a trespasser in what was once her kingdom. The judgment continued, swift and unsparing. Maria Gonzalez and Amber Davis, terminated for active participation in discrimination. Tyler Brooks, demoted and assigned to mandatory bias training. Helen Carter and several other customers permanently banned from all Prestige Collection properties. Diana then addressed the silent, terrified room. Her voice remained level, yet each word landed with the force of a gavel. "For 8 hours," she began, "you participated in a campaign of humiliation based on nothing more than the clothes I wore. You mocked me. You degraded me. You celebrated my pain." She looked directly at the now former manager. "You said I don't belong here, Brittany. You were right. I don't belong in a place that treats people this way. But this is my store, and I will see to it that it reflects my values." She announced a complete overhaul of the store's culture, from management to training. But it was her final words that would linger long after the doors were locked. "Dignity," she said, her voice resonating with unshakable authority, "is not earned with a bank account. Respect is not purchased with a designer label, and your worth is never determined by another person's prejudice. Today, you all learned that the most dangerous assumption you can make is to think you know someone's value simply by looking at them." The boutique, which had so recently been a theater of cruelty, was now a classroom of consequence, and Diana Williams, the woman they had cast out, now held their futures in her hands. It was a stark reminder that justice doesn't always arrive in a courtroom. Sometimes it arrives quietly, dressed in simple clothes, reminding us that you never truly know who you are speaking to, and that treating every person with dignity isn't just a moral imperative, it's the wisest choice you can make. Because the person you look down on today may be looking down from a height you can't even begin to imagine.